The Galactic Council had been around for 12,000 years. It was a big group of 347 different alien species from 2 galaxies. During all that time, they had met many new civilizations. Some were peaceful traders. Some were warriors. Some had amazing technology, but none of them prepared the Council for meeting humans. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiant. This was the first human ship built for deep space diplomacy. He looked out the window and watched the colorful nebula clouds drift past. Then he saw it. The Galactic Council's main station appeared in front of them. It was called Unity's Haven. The station was as big as Earth's moon. Billions of aliens lived inside it. Commander Lisa Chen stood next to Morrison. She was his second in command. Before joining the Space Navy, she had served in the Pacific Fleet on Earth. Her instincts told her something felt wrong about this meeting. The aliens were hiding something. Lieutenant Kyle Stevens worked at the communications station. He turned to face the captain. His voice was calm and professional. "We are getting a message from the Council's diplomatic team. They want us to dock at Bay 74 Alpha. Morrison nodded his head. "Tell them we agree and start moving us there." Then he called down to engineering. "How are all our systems doing?" Chief Engineer Danny Garcia checked his screens. "Everything looks good, sir. But I have to tell you, their station puts out incredible amounts of power. I have never seen numbers like this before." What the crew did not know was that their arrival had caused big problems for the Council's military leaders. The aliens had been watching Earth from far away for 3 years. They started watching when humans first exploded an atomic bomb. The normal rule was to wait until a species invented faster-than-light travel before making contact. But humans had surprised everyone. They built FTL drives much faster than anyone predicted. In the Council's war room, Supreme Commander Vexlar sat at a big table. He was a Korthan, which meant he was very tall with gray skin and 4 arms. His species had been the Council's main military force for 6,000 years. They had never lost a major war. But now Vexlar felt worried as he read reports about humans. His assistant was named Lysara. She was a Viridian, which meant she was thin and moved very gracefully. She pointed at a hologram floating in the air. "Commander, you need to see this. These are the military capabilities of the humans based on what we observed." Vexlar watched videos of human wars throughout their history. He saw battles that covered their whole planet. He saw weapons that could kill with terrible efficiency. He saw soldiers fighting in conditions that would kill most alien species. What disturbed him most was how humans could be extremely violent, but also show remarkable control. They knew when to fight and when to stop. Vexlar pointed at footage showing human soldiers doing incredibly difficult missions. "These warriors, what do the humans call them?" Lysara checked her translation computer. "According to our language programs, humans call them special forces or elite units. They have many different groups: Navy SEALs, Delta Force, Special Air Service, Spetsnaz, and dozens of others. Each human nation has their own special units. These warriors represent less than 1% of all human military personnel." Vexlar's 4 eyes opened wide with shock. "Only 1%? What about all the other soldiers?" Lysara looked at her datapad. "The humans call them regular forces or just regulars. These soldiers make up almost all of their military structure." The Supreme Commander felt a cold chill run down his back. His species rarely felt fear, but he felt it now. If only 1% of human soldiers were considered special, what could the other 99% do? The thought scared him. Back on the Defiant, Morrison and Chen got ready to meet the Council's diplomatic team. Morrison fixed his dress uniform so it looked perfect. Chen checked her pistol without thinking about it. It was just a habit from years of military service. Chen asked Morrison a question. "Do you think they will be friendly to us?" Morrison smiled a little. "There is only one way to find out, Commander. Though I have a feeling we're about to learn a lot of new things." What neither Morrison nor Chen understood was that the galaxy was about to learn new things too. The aliens thought they knew what to expect from humans. They had studied Earth from far away. They had watched human wars and human peace. They had seen human technology develop, but watching from a distance and meeting face to face were very different things. The Defiant slowly moved into the docking bay. The bay was enormous. It could hold 50 ships the size of the Defiant. Hundreds of alien vessels were parked in neat rows. Some ships looked like they were made of crystal. Others looked like living creatures. Some glowed with strange lights. The variety was amazing. Morrison watched the docking procedure carefully. He had commanded ships for 15 years, but this was different. This was first contact with an entire galactic civilization. Everything humanity did now would be remembered forever. The pressure was enormous, but Morrison felt ready. His crew was ready too. In the war room, Vexlar continued studying the human files. He read about human history. They had fought wars for thousands of years. But they had also built great civilizations. They created art and music. They explored their world and then reached for the stars. They were complicated creatures. That made them unpredictable. That made them dangerous. Lisara brought more information. Commander, I have more data on human training methods. Their basic military training lasts between 8 and 13 weeks, depending on which branch of service. During that time, recruits learn physical combat, weapons use, survival skills, and tactical thinking. After basic training, they receive more specialized instruction for their specific jobs. Vexlar thought about this information. Our warriors train for 6 standard cycles before they see combat, and we select them from families that have been bred for fighting over many generations. But humans just take volunteers? Anyone can join? Lisara nodded. Yes, Commander. They have minimum physical and mental standards, but any human who meets those standards can attempt to join their military. They do not use genetic breeding programs. They do not have a warrior caste. They just train regular citizens to be soldiers. This information made Vexlar even more concerned. The most powerful military force he had ever encountered was built from ordinary people. No genetic advantages, no selective breeding. Just training and determination. It seemed impossible. Yet the evidence was clear. The docking procedure finished smoothly. Morrison gathered his diplomatic team. Besides Chen, he brought Lieutenant Stevens and 2 security officers. The security officers wore dress uniforms but carried weapons. It was standard procedure for first contact situations. Nobody knew how the aliens would react. The airlock door opened with a soft hiss. Cool air flowed into the ship. Morrison took a deep breath and stepped through. On the other side, a group of aliens waited. They came in all shapes and sizes. Some were tall, some were short. Some had fur, some had scales, some seemed to be made of light itself. At the front stood a being that looked like it was made of moving crystals. The crystals reflected light in beautiful patterns. The crystal being spoke. A small device translated its words into English. Welcome, humans of Earth. I am High Counselor Zephyrin. We have waited a long time to meet your species officially. Please come with us. The Council is eager to speak with you. Morrison bowed slightly. It is an honor to meet you, High Counselor. We are grateful for this opportunity. Humanity is ready to take its place among the stars. As they walked through the station's corridors, Morrison and his team saw wonders they had only dreamed about. Aliens of every description moved through the halls. Some walked, some floated, some seemed to teleport short distances. Markets sold goods from 1,000 worlds. The air smelled of strange spices and unfamiliar scents. It was overwhelming and exciting at the same time. But behind the scenes in the war room, Vexlar was making preparations. He did not know if humans were a threat. He did not know if they were friends, but he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy had just changed forever. Nothing would ever be the same again. The first diplomatic meeting happened in the Council's Grand Hall. The room was massive. It could hold representatives from all member species at the same time. Captain Morrison and Commander Chen stood in the center. Around them, in rising levels like a stadium, sat hundreds of alien representatives. Some looked friendly. Some looked curious. Some looked worried. High Counselor Zephyrin spoke first. The crystal being's voice came through the translation device clearly. Humans of Earth, we welcome you to the Galactic Council. Your species has achieved faster than light travel. You have shown the technological skill needed for membership. However, we must discuss some concerns about your military structure. Morrison stood straight and spoke respectfully. We are happy to answer any questions, High Counselor. Supreme Commander Vexlar stepped forward. His forearms and tall body made him look very powerful. We have watched your world for some time. Your special operations forces are very impressive. They are highly trained warriors with amazing abilities. We would like to work with them to create military cooperation between our forces. Chen and Morrison looked at each other. They seemed confused. Chen spoke carefully. Special forces? Sir, our special operations units are important, yes, but they are made for specific missions only. The main strength of our military comes from our regular forces. A wave of whispers spread through the chamber. Aliens talked to each other in dozens of languages. The translation devices worked hard to keep up. Vexlar's face was hard to read, but his assistant Lysara looked shocked. Zephyryn's crystal body flickered. Perhaps our translation systems made an error. You said regular forces. What exactly do they do? Morrison pulled out a small device from his pocket. He pressed a button and a hologram appeared in the air. It showed charts and diagrams of Earth's military. Our regular forces make up about 95% of our total military. They are our Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. They do everything from large battles to peacekeeping to helping people during disasters. Vexlar's voice sounded tight. And their training? How long does it last? Morrison explained patiently. Basic training is different for each branch of service. It usually lasts 8 to 13 weeks. During that time, soldiers get intense physical training, learn to use weapons, study tactics, and learn survival skills. After basic training, they get more specialized training for whatever job they will do. Chen added more information. Our regular soldiers train to work in any environment. Desert, Arctic cold, jungle, mountains, underwater, even in space with no gravity. They learn to fight when they are tired, hungry, and under terrible stress. We also teach them medical skills, basic engineering, and how to work with people from other cultures. The chamber became completely silent. Lysara typed frantically on her datapad. She was checking information with other military advisors in the room. The silence felt heavy and uncomfortable. Vexlar spoke slowly, like he was trying to understand something impossible. Let me make sure I understand. These regular forces who make up most of your military go through training that lasts several of your months. They learn to work in hostile environments and fight in combat. If this is true, then what makes your special forces special? Morrison smiled a little. Special forces train for years, not months. We pick them from the best of our regular soldiers. Their training includes advanced language skills, deep cultural knowledge, unusual warfare methods, advanced explosives training, advanced medical training, and special ways to get into dangerous places. They often work in small teams or even alone. Sometimes they work deep in enemy territory for weeks or months at a time. Chen continued the explanation. But special forces are not even our most elite units. We have what we call Tier 1 special mission units. Their training is even harder. Some training programs fail more than 80% of the people who try. Only the very best make it through. A Korthan military advisor stood up suddenly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. This is not possible. Our best warriors train for 6 standard cycles. We breed them from families that have been warriors for generations. Their genetics are optimized for combat. Yet you say this is common among your species? Morrison shook his head. Not common. But our military members are all volunteers. We do not force anyone to serve. We have about 20 million people serving in active duty and reserve forces across all branches. The numbers seem to echo in the huge chamber. Most council species had militaries with only a few thousand soldiers. Some had tens of thousands. But 20 million? And all volunteers? It seemed unbelievable. Zephyryn's crystal form became dim. It was a sign of stress among their species. How many of those 20 million are special forces? Chen answered quickly. About 70,000 across all our special operations units combined. Vexlar sat down heavily in his chair. The other delegates had never seen the Supreme Commander do that during a meeting. Everyone understood what this meant. The humans considered these elite warriors special, but they were less than 1% of the total military. What did that say about the regular forces? What were those other 19,930,000 soldiers capable of? A delegate from the Helian Collective raised a thin arm. Perhaps we should ask for a demonstration of these regular forces. We need to understand what humanity brings to the Council. We need to see their capabilities with our own eyes. Morrison and Chen looked at each other again. They both knew this could go very well or very badly. The galaxy had certain ideas about what warriors should be like. Human soldiers were different. They came from a culture of conflict, yes, but also a culture that valued every individual soldier. That made them train harder. That made them more dangerous, Morrison nodded. We can arrange a demonstration. When would you like to see our forces in action? Zephyryn consulted with other council members for a moment. Their conversation was private, blocked by a sound-dampening field. After a few minutes, the field dropped. In 3 standard cycles, we can prepare our best training facility. We will create scenarios that test combat ability, tactical thinking, and adaptability. Is this acceptable? Morrison agreed. That works for us. We will send for a unit from Earth. They should arrive in time. As the meeting ended, groups of aliens gathered to talk among themselves. Some looked excited. Some looked nervous. Some looked scared. The humans had just revealed something that changed everything. The galaxy thought it knew what humans were. They had seen the special forces and been impressed. Now they learned those warriors were just the tip of the spear. The real power was in the regular forces. Vexlar and Lysara walked back to the war room in silence. Finally, Lysara spoke. "Commander, what have we gotten ourselves into?" Vexlar stopped walking. He turned to look at his assistant. "We have encountered a species that does not fit our models. They are not bred for war like the Korthan. They do not have superior technology like the Viridians. They are not physically powerful like the Thrain. Yet they may be more dangerous than all of us combined." Lysara looked worried. "Should we be concerned about them joining the Council?" The Supreme Commander thought for a long moment. "I do not know yet. But I do know this. We need to see these regular forces in action. We need to understand what we are dealing with. Only then can we make informed decisions." Back in their quarters on the Defiant, Morrison and Chen reviewed the meeting. Chen poured 2 cups of coffee from their small galley. She handed one to Morrison and sat down. Chen spoke quietly. "They were scared. Did you see their faces when we talked about the regulars?" Morrison sipped his coffee. "Yes. They built up this image of our special forces in their minds. When they learned about the regulars, it broke their understanding of military structure. They cannot imagine how we train so many people to such high standards." Chen nodded. "What unit should we bring for the demonstration?" Morrison thought about it. "Something representative. Not special forces. That would defeat the point. We need regular infantry, maybe the 82nd Airborne. They are solid, professional, and they have experience in quick deployment situations." Chen agreed. "A single platoon should be enough. 40 soldiers. That will show them what our regulars can do without overwhelming them." Morrison sent the request to Earth Command. Within hours, Lieutenant Kevin Phillips and his platoon from the 82nd Airborne Division received deployment orders. They were told to prepare for a diplomatic demonstration. They were told to bring standard gear. They were told to do their jobs the way they always did. The soldiers did not know they were about to change galactic history. They just knew they had orders. And soldiers follow orders. That was what regulars did. 3 days later, the Council's military observers gathered at Training Ground Epsilon. This was one of their most advanced combat training facilities in the entire galaxy. The facility used sophisticated technology to create any environment. It could present challenges that had tested the finest warriors from 300 species. Many of those warriors had failed. For this demonstration, humanity sent a single platoon from the 82nd Airborne Division. 40 regular infantry soldiers arrived on a transport ship. Their leader was Lieutenant Kevin Phillips. He was a young officer with only 3 years of military service. These were not special forces. They were not elite troops. They were just regular soldiers doing their jobs. Supreme Commander Vexlar watched the humans step off their transport. They wore standard combat uniforms. They carried normal weapons. They had no exotic equipment or special gear. They looked almost disappointingly ordinary. Some of them were laughing and joking with each other. They did not look like the deadly warriors Vexlar expected. Lysara stood next to her commander. She observed the humans carefully. They are so young. That officer looks barely past adulthood. Commander Chen had come to watch the demonstration. She stood in the observation area with the council members. Lieutenant Phillips is 26 Earth years old. That is average for his rank. Most of his soldiers are between 19 and 30 years old. Vexlar could not hide his shock. 19? We do not send warriors into combat until they have lived at least 40 cycles. They need that much time to mature and train properly. Chen smiled, but her expression was serious. We have found that youth has advantages if properly trained and led. Young soldiers adapt quickly to new situations. They recover from injuries faster. They can push physical limits that older soldiers cannot match. With the right training and leadership, they are extremely effective. The first scenario began. A computer created a simulated urban warfare environment. Buildings appeared. Streets formed. Enemy positions materialized. The hostile forces outnumbered the defenders 3-1. The objective was simple. Hold a strategic position for as long as possible. The current record was held by a Corthan Special Operations Unit. They had lasted 42 minutes before being overrun. Lieutenant Phillips gathered his platoon in a circle. His voice was calm and clear. All right, people, you know what to do. Squad leaders, set up your fields of fire. Make sure you have good overlapping coverage. First squad takes the north approach. Second squad takes east. Third squad takes south. Weapons squad, find good high ground and give us support. Let us show our new friends how the 82nd does business. The platoon responded together. Airborne. What happened next would be studied in council military schools for many years. The humans moved with smooth efficiency. Every soldier knew exactly what to do. They established overlapping fields of fire so enemies could not find safe approaches. They created fallback positions in case they had to retreat. They designated rally points where they could regroup if separated. Everything was planned and coordinated. When the simulated enemy forces attacked, the human response was devastating. Machine guns fired in controlled bursts. Rifles cracked with precise accuracy. Grenade launchers put explosives exactly where they needed to go. The enemy forces fell back, regrouped, and attacked again. It made no difference. Sergeant Nina Ortega led one of the squads. She had 4 years of military service. Her voice stayed calm even during intense combat. Parker Burke, shift right 15 meters. That building is going to give the enemy cover. I want suppressing fire on that position. Martinez, call for indirect fire on that staging area where they are gathering. The simulated enemies were very sophisticated. They were computer programs designed with combat tactics from dozens of species. They adapted to the situation. They tried flanking maneuvers. They coordinated their attacks. They used cover and concealment. None of it mattered. The human platoon stopped every assault. The humans held their position for 6 hours. When the simulation finally ended, it was not because the humans were defeated. The scenario simply ran out of enemy forces to send against them. The computer had thrown everything it had at the human position and failed to break through. The observation room was completely silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They just stared at the displays showing the results. Finally, Vexlar found his voice. Run the diagnostics again. There must be an error in the system. This cannot be correct. The technicians ran every diagnostic test 3 times. They checked every system. They verified every result. There were no errors. The humans had simply performed at a level the council had never witnessed before. They had broken the previous record by more than 5 hours. The facility director was a Viridian named Korath. He spoke in a quiet voice. The second scenario is prepared. This is our zero-gravity combat course. It requires soldiers to think in 3 dimensions instead of 2. Fighting while floating is very difficult. Most species find it exceptionally challenging. Many cannot adapt to it at all. Lieutenant Phillips checked with his soldiers. Anyone need a break before we continue? Sergeant Ortega answered for the group. Negative, sir. We are good to go. The other soldiers nodded in agreement. They had just fought for 6 hours straight. Now they were ready to do it again. Their endurance amazed the watching aliens. The platoon entered the zero-gravity chamber. The artificial gravity turned off. The soldiers began floating. Within minutes, they were moving through the space like they had trained in zero gravity their entire lives. They used the 3-dimensional environment to their advantage. They set up ambushes from unexpected angles. They used floating debris as mobile cover. They coordinated their movements in ways that seemed almost like telepathy. A Corthan observer stood up angrily. How are they doing this? We spend years training our people for zero-gravity combat. Years. These humans just walked in and started performing like experts. Commander Chen answered simply. Basic training. All our infantry receives zero-gravity familiarization. It is part of the standard curriculum that everyone goes through. We train all our soldiers to fight in any environment, because we never know where they might need to deploy. By the end of the day, the human platoon had completed 7 different scenarios. They fought in urban warfare conditions. They fought in zero gravity. They fought in a simulated jungle environment. They fought in Arctic cold. They fought while dealing with chemical weapons. They practiced close-quarters battle in tight spaces. They performed a hostage rescue mission. They exceeded the Council's best performance benchmarks in every single scenario. The jungle scenario had been particularly impressive. The humans moved through dense vegetation without making sounds. They used hand signals to communicate silently. They set ambushes that the enemy walked right into. They seemed to disappear into the environment like ghosts. The Arctic scenario tested their endurance. Temperatures dropped to levels that would kill most species. The humans just put on cold weather gear and kept fighting. They built shelters when needed. They maintained their weapons in freezing conditions. They never complained or asked to stop. The chemical warfare scenario required them to fight while wearing protective masks and suits. This made breathing harder and limited vision. Most species could barely function under these conditions. The humans operated almost as effectively as they did without the protective equipment. The close-quarters battle scenario put them in narrow corridors and small rooms. They had to clear buildings room by room. This was slow, dangerous work. One mistake could be fatal. The humans moved with careful precision. They checked every corner. They covered every angle. They worked as a team with perfect coordination. The hostage rescue was the most difficult scenario. They had to enter a building, neutralize hostiles, and rescue civilians without harming any of the hostages. This required incredible accuracy and restraint. The humans performed it perfectly. Every hostile was eliminated. Every hostage survived. The precision was unbelievable. As Lieutenant Phillips led his platoon back to their transport, the soldiers were tired but satisfied. They had done their jobs well. They did not know that they had just changed how the entire galaxy viewed humanity. To them, this had been a normal day of training and demonstration. Vexlar stood quietly and watched them go. His mind was working hard to process what he had witnessed. Finally, he approached Commander Chen. He needed to ask her a question. "These are truly your regular forces? Not special operations? Not elite units?" Chen nodded. "Yes, sir. The 82nd Airborne is a conventional infantry division. They are good soldiers and well-trained, but they are nothing extraordinary by our standards. We have dozens of divisions just like them." Vexlar looked at the humans boarding their transport. They were young. They were laughing among themselves about the day's events. They looked like anybody's children. They did not look like the galaxy's most capable warriors, but that was exactly what made them so dangerous. They were ordinary people trained to do extraordinary things. The Supreme Commander turned back to Chen. His voice was quiet, but serious. "Commander Chen, I believe the Council needs to completely reconsider our assumptions about humanity. We thought we understood you. Today showed us that we understood nothing at all." Chen met his eyes. "Sir, what you saw today is what we can do with a few weeks of basic training and 3 years of service." 8 months after humanity joined the Galactic Council, the galaxy faced its first major crisis involving the new members. The Krell Dominion was a militant empire. They had rejected council membership hundreds of years ago. Now they had begun aggressive expansion along the frontier worlds. They were conquering new territory and nobody seemed able to stop them. The Krell were powerful and dangerous. They had built a warrior culture over centuries. They had conquered 47 star systems through superior tactics and overwhelming force. Their military was disciplined and professional. Their technology was advanced. Their desire for conquest seemed unlimited. Most species feared them. When the Krell attacked the colony world of New Meridian, the Council had to respond. New Meridian was home to 3 million civilians from various Council species. Families lived there. Children went to school there. People had built lives there. The Council could not abandon them. Supreme Commander Vexlar assembled a coalition fleet. It was the largest military force the Council had deployed in 1,000 years. Ships came from 14 different species. Soldiers volunteered from across the galaxy. Everyone understood what was at stake. If the Krell took New Meridian, they would not stop there. The military commanders gathered in the war room aboard the flagship. Vexlar stood at the head of the table. His voice was grave. "We need to move quickly. The Krell have a 3-day head start. They will have established strong defensive positions by the time we arrive. Breaking through will be difficult and costly." Admiral Frank Cooper commanded Earth's 3rd Fleet. He was 53 years old and a veteran of many conflicts on Earth. He studied the tactical display carefully. His experience told him this would be a hard fight. "What are our total numbers?" Lysara consulted her datapad. 48 capital ships, 200 support vessels, and approximately 30,000 ground troops from 14 different species. Intelligence reports suggest the Krell have roughly equal numbers. This will be a very even fight. General Thexrin was a senior Korthan officer. His species had been the Council's primary military force for thousands of years. He looked at Admiral Cooper. "What is humanity contributing to this operation?" Cooper answered simply, "We are contributing 12 capital ships and 60 support vessels. For ground operations, we are deploying the 3rd Marine Division. We are also sending the UNS Roosevelt Carrier Group to establish aerospace superiority over the planet." Thexerin looked disappointed. "Only one division? We were hoping humanity would send your special forces. This situation requires your best warriors." Cooper shook his head. "Marines are regular forces, General. They are light infantry, mechanized units, and artillery. The division has about 18,000 personnel. These are not special operations forces. These are conventional troops." The Corthan General seemed concerned. After the demonstrations at Training Ground Epsilon, the Council had developed healthy respect for human regular forces. But 18,000 soldiers seemed like a modest contribution given what was at stake. The General did not understand that humans had a different definition of modest contribution. The Coalition fleet arrived at New Meridian 3 days later. The situation was worse than expected. The Krell had firmly entrenched themselves. They had established strong orbital defenses. They had fortified landing zones on the surface. They were systematically clearing the population centers and moving civilians to detention camps. Time was running out. Lysara studied the sensor readings. Their defense grid is very extensive. Breaking through using conventional tactics will take days, perhaps weeks. We do not have that much time. The civilians are in danger now. Admiral Cooper spoke flatly. The civilians do not have weeks. They might not have days. General Reeves, how long do your Marines need to prepare for deployment? Major General Sarah Reeves commanded the 3rd Marine Division. She was a professional soldier with 25 years of experience. She had been studying the tactical situation since they arrived in orbit. 6 hours for full combat preparation, sir. But we can have the first wave ready to deploy in 2 hours. Vexlar looked shocked. 2 hours? General, the Krell defenses are still fully active. Any landing would be under extremely heavy fire. Your troops would be landing directly into a combat zone. The casualties could be severe. Reeves met his eyes calmly. Yes, sir. That is what Marines do. We specialize in amphibious assault operations. Hostile landing zones are our natural environment. We train specifically for this kind of mission. We are ready to go now if needed. One of the Council commanders looked confused. Amphibious? What does that word mean? Admiral Cooper explained. It is an Earth term from our history. Originally, it meant assault from sea to land against defended beaches. Now we apply it to any contested landing operation. Ship to shore, orbit to ground, the principle is the same. Marines are trained to fight their way to the objective, establish a secure foothold, and hold it against counterattack. That is their specialty. What followed became known as the Battle of New Meridian. Many historians later argued it was not really a battle. It was a demonstration of human military doctrine and capability. It showed the galaxy what human regular forces could accomplish when properly employed. The first wave of Marines launched in their dropships. The ships streamed down through the atmosphere in tight formation. Krell defensive fire filled the sky. Plasma bolts and missiles reached up toward the descending ships. The humans did not try to avoid the fire. They did not wait for it to be suppressed. They went straight through it. A Viridian tactical officer watched his screen in horror. They are taking heavy fire. Multiple hits recorded. Why are they not pulling back and waiting for support? Admiral Cooper watched the tactical display. His face showed no emotion. Because there are 3 million civilians down there who need help right now. Those people are counting on us. Marines do not pull back when people need them. They push forward. The dropships crashed down hard under fire. Their armored hulls were scarred and blackened, but they remained intact. The rear ramps dropped and Marines poured out immediately. They engaged Krell ground forces within seconds of landing. They moved with incredible speed and overwhelming aggression. The watching Council observers had never seen anything like it. Staff Sergeant Luis Ramirez led his rifle squad through the contested landing zone. Enemy fire came from multiple directions. Buildings burned around them. The situation was chaos, but Ramirez kept his voice calm and clear. Move, move, move! First fire team, suppress that gun emplacement on the left. Second team, flank right and get behind that position. Third team, follow me. We are pushing through. The Krell had never encountered an enemy that attacked with such fierce coordination. Their defensive positions were designed to withstand long sieges. They were built to hold out for weeks or months. But the Marines did not siege the positions. They assaulted them directly with speed and violence. Within 4 hours, all the landing zones were secured. General Thexerin stared at the tactical feeds in disbelief. This is impossible. The Krell are the most formidable ground force we have encountered in over 1,000 years. They have never been pushed back this quickly. How are the humans doing this? General Reeves answered while coordinating the next phase of operations. Training, doctrine, and motivation, General. Every Marine down there knows what is at stake. They know civilians are depending on them. They know children are in danger. That knowledge makes them extremely dangerous opponents. Fear for others is more powerful than fear for yourself. By the end of the second day, the 3rd Marine Division had broken through the Krell's main defensive line. They were pushing rapidly toward the civilian detention camps. The Krell forces tried to regroup and establish new defensive positions. The Marines gave them no time. They maintained constant pressure. They never stopped advancing. The Krell commander was a veteran of 30 campaigns. He had conquered 12 worlds personally. He had never retreated from battle in his entire career. But now he faced an enemy he could not defeat. The humans fought with a combination of skill and determination he had never seen before. His troops were demoralized. His defenses were crumbling. He made the hardest decision of his life and ordered a withdrawal. New Meridian was liberated on the 3rd day. The Marines reached the detention camps and freed the civilians. Medical teams moved in to provide care. Engineers began repairing damaged infrastructure. The crisis was over. The Council's coalition forces had barely engaged in combat before the battle ended. The humans had done almost everything themselves. In the aftermath, Council military leaders tried to understand what had happened. They reviewed every combat recording. They analyzed every tactical decision. They interviewed survivors on both sides. The conclusion was undeniable. Human regular forces operated at a level the Council had thought impossible. Vexlar sat in his quarters late at night. He could not sleep. His mind kept replaying what he had witnessed. Finally, he called Lysara to his office. She arrived quickly, still in her duty uniform. The Supreme Commander looked tired. Lysara, I need your honest assessment. What did we see at New Meridian? She sat down and thought carefully before answering. We saw what happens when you train every soldier to a very high standard. We saw what happens when you give them CL. The aftermath of the New Meridian operation sent shockwaves through the entire Galactic Council. The humans had accomplished in 3 days what military experts said should have taken months. More importantly, they had done it with soldiers they considered ordinary. Regular forces. Not special operations, not elite units. Just standard military personnel doing their jobs. Supreme Commander Vexlar stood before the full Council assembly. All the delegates from 347 species watched him. His forearms spread wide in a gesture that meant he was making an important statement. Honored delegates, we can no longer view humanity through our traditional understanding of military power. What we witnessed at New Meridian was not an exceptional display by elite forces. It was standard operating procedure for human regular military units. High Counselor Zephrin's crystalline form pulsed with different colors as it thought. The crystal being spoke carefully. Supreme Commander, what exactly are you proposing to this council? Vexlar took a deep breath. A complete restructuring of our military doctrine across all council species. The humans have demonstrated capabilities we did not know were possible. Their regular forces exceed our elite units in almost every category we can measure. They have agreed to share their training methods with us. I propose we accept this offer and begin implementing human training standards throughout the Council military forces. Admiral Cooper and General Reeves sat in the observation gallery watching the proceedings. With them was Colonel Pete Harrison. He was one of the senior instructors who would help implement the new training programs across the galaxy. Harrison had 30 years of military experience. He had started as a regular enlisted soldier and worked his way up through the ranks. Harrison spoke quietly to the others. Do you think they are ready for what we are going to put them through? Our basic training is going to seem impossibly hard to most of them. Reeves nodded. They are motivated. After New Meridian, every military in the Council wants to know how we do what we do. The question is not whether they want to learn. The question is whether they can handle the intensity and pace of our training methods. Many of them will struggle at first. Cooper looked down at the council floor where the debate continued. We will find out soon enough. The first joint training exercise starts next week. We have a full battalion of volunteers from different council species. 800 soldiers ready to learn human methods. This will be interesting. That training exercise would become legendary in council military history. Human instructors started by teaching the basics: physical conditioning, weapons handling, small unit tactics, fire and maneuver, cover and concealment. What the council volunteers quickly discovered was that human basic training was far more demanding than their own elite warrior programs. Staff. Sergeant Maria Gonzalez found herself instructing a squad of Corthan warriors. Each of them had decades of military experience. They were veterans of multiple campaigns. They had fought battles across many worlds. Yet on the third day of human training, they were struggling during a night march with full combat loads. One of the Corthan veterans gasped for breath. His voice showed his exhaustion. This is impossible. We have been marching for 6 hours without rest. How do you maintain this pace? How do your soldiers do this? Gonzalez was not even breathing hard despite carrying the same equipment load. She answered simply, because we have to. In real combat, the enemy does not care if you are tired. The enemy does not care if you are hungry or thirsty or in pain. You keep moving or you die. You keep fighting or your friends die. It is that simple. So we train harder than we will ever have to fight. Another Corthan protested. But you are human. Your species is not specialized for warfare. You are generalists. You evolved to be adaptable, not to be fighters. We Corthan are genetically bred for battle over hundreds of generations. Our bodies are optimized for combat. Yet you outperform us easily. How is this possible? Gonzalez smiled in the darkness. She had heard this question before. That is exactly why we are dangerous. We are not bred for war. We choose it. Every human in uniform volunteered to be here. Nobody forced us to serve. We train harder than other species, because we have to overcome our limitations through discipline and practice. We cannot rely on superior genetics or specialized evolution. We only have our training and our determination, and we know what is at stake when we fail. We fight for each other and for the people depending on us. Back on Unity's Haven, the council chambers were filled with debate. A delegation from the hegemony of worlds had arrived. They were concerned about humanity's growing influence in council affairs. Their spokesman was Ambassador Krelthar. He addressed the assembly with obvious worry in his voice. We must carefully consider the implications of allowing such a militaristic species into positions of authority. The humans have demonstrated frightening combat capabilities. They have shown they can defeat any force we can field against them. What is to stop them from using this power against council members? What prevents them from becoming conquerors themselves? Captain Morrison had been promoted to Admiral after New Meridian. He now served as humanity's primary military liaison to the council. He stood up to address the ambassador's concerns. May I respond to these questions, High Counselor? Zephyrin gestured for him to proceed. Please do, Admiral Morrison. These concerns deserve a thorough answer. Morrison activated a holographic display. Images from Earth's history appeared in the air above the council floor. This is from our own history. Yes, we have thousands of years of warfare, but we also have thousands of years of learning when not to fight. We created laws of war. We developed rules of engagement. We established concepts like proportional response and protection of civilians. We built international agreements to limit the horror of combat. We learned these principles through hard and painful experience. The display showed many images. Medics treating wounded enemies on battlefields. Soldiers sharing food rations with hungry civilians. Peace treaties being signed. Humanitarian missions delivering aid. Soldiers rebuilding schools and hospitals. These images told a different story about humanity. Morrison continued speaking. Our capacity for violence is matched by our capacity for restraint. Every soldier learns the rules of armed conflict in basic training. Every officer studies military ethics and the laws of war. We are effective at combat because we understand its true cost. We know what war does to people, to families, to societies. That knowledge makes us work very hard to avoid unnecessary conflict. We know when to fight and when to find other solutions. Commander Chen was now Captain Chen. She had been promoted for her role at New Meridian. She stood and added to Morrison's statement. At New Meridian, our Marines had the firepower to level entire city blocks. We could have destroyed every building the Krell were using for cover. It would have made our job much easier and faster. But we did not do that because civilians were nearby. Protecting innocent life is more important than achieving military objectives quickly. This principle is fundamental to how we train every soldier. The chamber fell quiet. Delegates looked at each other and had quiet conversations. Finally, Vexlar stood. His presence commanded attention. I have fought beside human forces. I have seen their capabilities with my own eyes. But I have also seen their restraint and their dedication to protecting others. I have watched them risk their own lives to save beings they barely knew. The ambassador's concerns are noted and recorded, but I believe they are not justified. Humanity's greatest strength is not their military skill. It is their character and their values. The vote that followed was clear and decisive. Humanity was granted full military partnership status in the Council. They received responsibility for training and doctrine development across all member species forces. It was an unprecedented level of trust and authority for such a new member of the Council. 5 years later, the transformation was obvious and remarkable. Council forces trained to human standards were performing at levels that would have been considered completely impossible before first contact. Soldiers from dozens of species now went through modified versions of human basic training. They learned human tactics and doctrine. They adopted human values about protecting civilians and following the laws of war. More importantly, the galaxy was more secure than it had been in thousands of years. The Krell Dominion, faced with a council military that had adopted human training and tactics, chose to negotiate for peace rather than continue their expansion. Other potential aggressors reconsidered their plans when they saw what the reformed council forces could do. Several long-standing conflicts were resolved through negotiation instead of warfare. In a quiet moment between meetings, Admiral Morrison and Supreme Commander Vexlar stood on an observation deck. They watched ships from 100 different worlds conducting joint training exercises together. The coordinated movements were smooth and professional. Species that had never worked together before now operated as unified teams. Vexlar spoke thoughtfully. You know, when we first encountered humanity, we were terrified of your special forces. We saw videos of them performing impossible missions. We thought they represented your maximum capability. We believed they were the most dangerous warriors in your entire military. Morrison chuckled at the memory. I remember